Paul, and I'm joined by Raylene Gorum, and she and I met, I think it was in October, at the Open Studios for the Navy Shipyard Artists, which was a lot of fun. You get to walk around and see the art of a lot of different artists and talk to them. And I just immediately, I think we just had this great rapport talking about Raylene's works, but then I found out that she had a publicly commissioned work that was going to be on the Bay Trail. Most of you know I kind of have this obsession with the Bay Trail, do a whole program about it once a month. And so we're going to talk about this artwork. But first, I want to give you a little background about Raylene. So, Raylene, I know you studied at Cal Poly, and also you studied architecture in Paris, and have done work at Cooper's Union, some work in London. So your background is as an architect, but you've created a lot of publicly commissioned art, and this is art that people would be kind of seeing just going about their everyday life in public places, sometimes inside private buildings. We're going to see some of that. And the other thing I'll say about you, Raylene, is you're just great to talk to, and it's always fun, to look at the artwork, but then to talk to the artist and get more information about it.
Thanks, Rodney.
Anything we should add to all that?
I think you just about summed it up. I guess I'll make a clarification. I presently live in a houseboat in Sausalito, not quite in San Francisco, but we're just across the bridge. So,
and you're very involved in the Sausalito community.
Yes.
You're on. Is it the recreation?
I'm the chair of the Parks and Rec Commission, which on the San Francisco side, they're the commissioning agent. The Rexon Park actually is commissioning the public art we'll be talking about. And I'm on the board of the Community Boating Center in Sausalito, where we're trying to provide affordable access to the waterfront. Yeah, and I volunteer at the school, and it's a small community, so it's you're able to be kind of hands-on here. It's nice. And I had moved from New York City to Sausalito, so it's a world of difference.
Yeah, and it's great that you have that background because recreation in Sausalito is recreation mostly on the Bay Trail. So
yeah.
So you and I have kind of aligned interests, but it was really your art that I responded to when I was at the shipyard. And then you told me about this piece we're going to look at called Lady Bayview. And this is something that's not here yet, but at the India Basin Shoreline Park, I think that's the right name for it. India Basin is in the Bayview Hunters Point neighborhood. And there's a lot of history to this place, but there's going to be this park that gets created. And what we're looking at here is your rendition, Raylene, of what will eventually be there, which is this kind of enormous deck with this figure on it. And it's going to be something if you're on the ground, you'll just see parts of it. But if you're in the hills above it, you'll get a really great view of it. And even people like maybe traveling by airplane will be seeing this thing.
She's big.
She is big. What do we say? Like 130 feet tall, perhaps?
Yep, she's about 130 feet tall or long and about 45 feet wide. Her head is something like 17 feet wide by 23. So you'll definitely see her on Google Earth. And when I've flown, on airplanes, I've looked out, and I think you will probably be able to see her from the airplane. So she will make a presence for Bayview Hunters Point area.
And let's give you guys a sense of where this is going to be. So this is India Basin. So down here in the southeast corner of San Francisco. Of course, I have to show you on a Bay Trail map card what this would be. It's very close to Heron's Head Park. And I think we'll probably get a little bit into the history of this area, but this was the location of a very, very large PG&E power plant that was extremely toxic. And the community banded together and was able to get it shut down. And now it's being replaced with all this Bayfront Park. And here are some of the elements of Lady Bayview. And this is, let's go back to that picture. This round thing is something that she's holding in her hands, and it's got kind of, you said it's like a mosaic-like effect. It'll actually look different from different angles. Is that correct, Raylene?
Well, I think of it as this kind of sky element or the universe or all that's possible that she's holding in her center. And so it's got little flecks of glass, kind of mirrored glass in it. So as the light changes, on the waterfront there, and these colored glasses will also be incorporated into the color parts of her head and hands. So she's going to be in concrete basically on this pier, and so I'm trying to think about how to not just have it be kind of like painted colored concrete, but something that catches the light and becomes a little bit dynamic and lasts over time.
And we're going to hold back on telling you everything there is to know about the ideas behind this piece, because I want you guys just to think about, like, what are we looking at? These are, by the way, you'll see these ships that are in it. So I'm going to go to, let's see if this image here, and just like ask for people in the audience to either like speak up or chat. Like, what do you like? What's going on with this image? Where is it taking you? What's your reaction to it?
It almost looks like a labyrinth.
Oh, so you get a sense of like a labyrinth with all these little lines.
You could walk through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You imagine people walking around all this.
Yeah, because those are just flat lines, right? Because first I thought they were benches from far away.
Well, these are benches here. There are going to be benches.
So those are just flat
but
lines.
these are flat lines painted on the concrete. I see Paco has his hand raised. Go ahead, Paco.
Apparently, you know what? That lady looks like she is lying down, like on a swimming pool.
So you get a sense of like she's like horizontal. She's lying down.
Yeah.
Do anyone want to guess what do you think she's like? What kind of a person do you think she is?
She's like a gorgeous lady.
She's very beautiful,
Girl.
right? She's very. You get a sense
And
of like
actually, I still think that people who are walking around and got like they like walking around.
And do you think that like those people
culture.
walking around, like they'll be happy to be in her presence?
Yes.
I see.
I still see somebody who's looking around, like viewing on the bay shore.
People will be viewing the bay from
Watching,
this location, and she'll be like right next to them. I do see a comment from Sherry that like she gets a sense that the woman is proud. And William says, I'm guessing there is something about the maritime history of the area. Sarah says she looks very zen. And then Catherine says, Lady Earth. Catherine, I'd love to hear more about that. Like, what about her gives you a sense of Lady Earth? Like Mother Earth, kind of? And we'll see if Catherine wants to add to that. And Sherry says, what are the things that look like F's or flags?
Catherine wants to add to that. And Sherry says, what are the things that look like F's or flags?
So you see these things that look like kind of F's or flags. Yeah. We're gonna like it.
So you see these things that look like kind of F's or flags. Yeah. We're gonna like it.
And I have to tell you, unfortunately, I think your sound we're not getting your sound very good. You may have a not a great connection. Is it, so
she's asking about the clarification on the F's and the flags.
Okay, so we're going to tell you about the F's and the flags. Catherine is saying, yes, exactly. Lady Mother Earth nurturing the neighborhood. Oh, I like that. And Ron says, the lines remind me of the swirling winds of the bay. So representing the bay view. This is great, because this is what, like Raylene and I talked about this. that this is going to be, it's public art. People are going to be seeing it. You could have like a plaque explaining things to you, but this is the stuff you're going to get from this without any of that explanation. And so, Raylene, why don't you tell us more about the ideas behind this figure that you created?
Well, first, Rodney, you're right. You make public art and you put it out there, and you do your best. You imbue it with your ideas and the feelings that you want to convey, but you never know. So it makes me very happy to see that you guys are getting so much of what I think is in the work, and your questions are spot on, and I love that she's proud and nurturing the neighborhood. That's where I came from. I started each project with a deep research dive into the history of the space and what elements I want to bring forth or highlight. And this particular neighborhood is a very interesting, very charged neighborhood. I have personal family history there too, but I wanted her, after reading about the various histories of the neighborhood, and I'm going to get into the weeds here very fast. But it's been a succession, it's been a wonderful port from the time of the Ohlone Native Americans. And they had their canoes, their summer fishing village, and it's been a history of immigrants that have come through and plied their trades and built their ships. So yes, absolutely a maritime history. And I'm trying to tell the immigrant story through the maritime history, because each one have had their succession of time in the port, and it's also faced a lot of hardship. So I did first start with this idea of Lady Bayview being a protective guardian, and I think port and culture, seafaring culture, has this guardian figure, religiously or otherwise, in their ports to protect the waterfront. And I think we're ready for that kind of energy here.
Yeah, and I want to go to that quote that was so this is publicly commissioned art, and Raylene made a proposal to the San Francisco Arts Commission, and this quote kind of jumped out at me. She says, "It is my aim to create a work for this former shipwright's perch, which speaks to the many-layered maritime past in the context of a good-spirited guardian figure who holds the tides of change in a gentle embrace." And also, I know in that you talked about the activism of people in the Bayview neighborhood, particularly a group of women called the Bayview Five, who were part of the group fighting to get the PG&E plant shut down and for other improvements to that neighborhood to be put in place. Do you want to tell us more about like the Bayview Five and how they inspired you, Raylene?
Yeah, it was absolutely. That was a shining light in this history of a lot of pollution and sadness and changes in the neighborhood. There were five, well, there were more than five, but there's a loose coalition that changed over time of African American women, moms, advocates in the community, known as the Big Five or the Bayview Five. And they, in the 60s and particularly the 70s, I think early 1973, they went to Congress. They went to Washington, D.C. and demanded an audience with Congress and got it. And were trying to advocate. There was temporary housing left over from the naval yards, and there had been a promise to improve that housing. And they went to Washington, got an audience with Congress, and wouldn't leave until they got money. And they came back with $30 million. And also Robert Kennedy came back and James Baldwin came back to the Bayview. And so they really shone a light on the issues at hand. And individually, they all continued to work within the neighborhood, creating health centers, other affordable housing, performing arts centers. And they're just tremendous. And I think that they are very much a beacon to other leaders in the neighborhood today and going on, female and otherwise. But I did feel this protective feminine spirit was something that could be welcomed in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that was already there. And so I wanted to honor what was already happening.
I know regarding the power plant, there is a part of the park right next to Heron's Head, which has interpretive panels talking about the whole history of the neighborhood coming together and getting this, it's just really, this place is totally transformed by having that power plant shut down.
Yeah.
And I believe that it's had a big impact on the health in that community too. I also wanted to mention, you've got these different ships that are in the image. And here, hopefully you guys can see this. There are all these different ships, and there's a container ship, which is kind of the modern shipping on the bay. But here's like a Chinese junk. I think there's Portuguese ships, and it's representing all these waves of immigrants who were in India Basin, in other places in San Francisco too.
Yeah.
And I think, Raylene, you said like your family was kind of part of that whole migration, right?
Yeah, my family, I grew up in San Jose, but before I got here, my grandparents are mixed race couple, and they got married in 1940. It was illegal for them to marry until 1948. So they got married in 1948, and my uncle was born in 1949, and my grandpa was a jazz man, and he helped do the bookings at the Jazz Workshop in San Francisco. And they moved around a lot in the Bay. They didn't talk about the hard times a lot, but I can only imagine in that kind of environment that they faced a lot of hardships and also economic hardships. But they were part of the Fillmore in the 50s, and then a lot of there was displacement. They redeveloped that area and moved a lot of folks to the Bayview, and my family got transposed over there and spent a good part of the 50s, late 50s in Bayview, and then continued to move on around the Bay and having rent parties and whatnot. But yeah, my dad has a lot of stories. He just remembers that as a kid playing around the Bayview and whatnot. But it's touching to be able to come back and join this dialogue again.
And really be part of a really positive new chapter for that part of San Francisco.
Yeah.
The India Basin Park is going to be, I think it's going to be a tremendously beautiful and interesting place. We did have people talking about these lines, the Fs.
Yeah.
And tell us more about that, Raylene.
I love it. You guys I think I saw a couple of comments that were spot on, that it looks like wind or swirling water movements in the bay. And they are any sailor would be able to recognize these. They're called wind barbs. And so they denote the direction and speed of the wind. So at first glance, the ones that look like kind of like little lowercase t's, that signifies 5 knots per hour wind. The F ones I think are 10. There's 3. There's different sizes that indicate the direction and speed of the wind. So I see this as an opportunity. I love whoever said, it looks like a labyrinth, and kind of picturing your motion around that. I want to give people who may not see a plaque or understand this different ways to interact with public art. And I very much see the possibility of, kids or dancers or people walking around the wind barbs. There's motion. And then as you sink in further, I can see classrooms coming in and having kind of STEM and STEAM opportunities to learn, like, oh, this is navigation. This is what we're seeing on the bay. All those boats out there would understand how to read the wind barbs here and what that tells you. Or you can have them add up. I just see a lot of ways that you could interact with this piece.
Yeah, and it's funny because this is publicly commissioned. You went through this process to be selected as the artist for this site, but you told me like you were in a pretty interesting place when you found out that I think it's when you found out you were shortlisted. Is that right?
That's right.
So what were
Yeah.
you doing? What were you doing when you found out you were shortlisted?
Well, I live in a maritime community, and my neighbors were sailing back from, they had been gone for a couple years. They've circumnavigated the globe in that boat that they built themselves. And so they were coming back from a long trip, and I joined them to sail back from Hawaii back to the San Francisco Bay. And there's not internet, there's not phones. So I had applied for this opportunity and was hoping to find out, but I had to kind of communicate with a very slow satellite to get the message that you've been shortlisted along with 3 other artists to make a proposal for something in the Innis Basin here. And we celebrated in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and it was very fitting.
Yeah, that does seem very fitting. And I think it's like you do these public commissions, and just I want everyone to think about like you'll submit a proposal, you'll create all these drawings and a write up and everything, and you're not going to really get paid for this unless you get selected to be the artist. So it's a kind of a risk. And
Absolutely.
we just look at these things that are in our public places and enjoy them, and we don't think about the effort that went into creating them and getting them selected. So I'm I'm definitely going to be thinking about that when this thing opens up. Which tell us like what's the timeline for this to become reality?
Right. So, like I said, I was sailing from Hawaii. It was September 2020 when I found out I was shortlisted, and we had maybe 2 months to put our proposals together. And then I think, by the end of the year, I knew I was the selected artist. And for the last year, I've been working with all of the committees and review and refining Lady Bayview and making her more real. And last fall, as a part of a huge set of drawings for the whole park, when you show that rendering with all of the elements of this really amazing park, and the most expensive park that's going to be built in San Francisco, actually, it has a lot of features, a lot of community engagement features, waterfront features. There's a huge set of drawings, and Lady Bayview is a part of that is now out to bid. We say Lady Bayview is out to bid, so contractors can, these are the specifications that the contractors look at and know how much is it going to cost to make this 5,000 square foot piece of art out of concrete with all these, special glasses and whatnot. And all the other elements of the park. And so that bid set, what the contractors will come back with a price for the entire park, with probably a specialist focusing on this art piece, like a concrete specialist, as a part of this pier. And those bids should come back around this spring. I think March or April they're due, and then they'll select a contractor and we'll tighten up the drawings again, and they'll start construction hopefully by the end of the year, or maybe, definitely by the end of the year. And they've already started remediating all the toxicity that's on the site with a different contractor. And in 4 years-ish, we'll be able to enjoy this park.
So
if all goes well.
2026, there'll be a big party to
Right.
officially launch Lady Bayview.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I'm definitely going to be among the people going out there on a regular basis. We did have a comment in chat. It's as Catherine says, it's a very serene spot these days. Raylene's sculpture will be a fabulous addition to enhance the feel. Thank you. I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. Wonderful as for a Hunters Point artist to be selected. Very appropriate. Sherry wanted to point out that her son Coleman is right now in the middle of the ocean on a container ship between Honolulu and Oakland.
It's a good
So,
place to be.
yeah, I guess so. A question from Marcia. What is the gray stripe on the floor below the torso of Lady Bayview? Is it,
That
oh, is it, yeah, what is that?
That is that's a great that ended up changing how big Lady Bayview was, and we had to really debate how that was because it wasn't on the original drawings that the artists had to respond to. It's a hinge that like a seismic hinge that connects the pier to the land. And so it was a big question of do we shrink Lady Bayview to be on one side of the pier or can she cross that? So obviously we went with crossing it, and so that those wind barbs would come out and invite people who were at the end of the pier and on the pathway to be able to see that, and that all the other elements wouldn't be shrunk too small. But yeah, that's a great question. Great observation.
Yeah, another question from Catherine is the woman's face based on anybody in particular, or is it generic?
Well, another great question. I had originally wanted to base it specifically on one of the Bayview Five women, and that has its own complications, right? You have to get family support, and and really we wanted it to be more generalized. And so I love the comments where you're noticing that she's proud and she's kind of zen. And so it's kind of like, how do you capture that spirit? And still have her be identifiably an African American woman, and have that strength and serenity. So she's a bit of an amalgam. Her origins may have to remain a secret.
Question from Nikki. Is there any type of partnership developing with the nearby Raycology Center to utilize some of the city's recycled materials?
Oh, that's a really fun idea. I'm not sure. Like I said, the Rexon Park of San Francisco is the client here, and they would probably know more about that. I know they've been really tremendously sensitive about the site and the history, and there's like a shipwright cottage to the side that they're preserving and providing a community room, and doing this cleanup. But I don't know. I can't speak to that specifically.
Yeah. Another question. How much involvement did the Port of San Francisco have? This is Port of San Francisco property, isn't it?
I don't know. I know at least I don't know what transactions happened, but it's now governed by Rexon Park.
Yeah.
But it had been a private, it had been a working waterfront port where shipbuilders had been building like ships like the Alma, the Chinese junks, all these other ships the Navy, had used portions of it before. So I don't know how all the land transfers have gone down, but by the time of my involvement, the Port of San Francisco, at least, was out of the picture.
Yeah, you've been dealing with the Arts Commission, and then the site will be administered by San Francisco Parks and Rec. But I do think it's a lot of those parks like Heron's Head, Crane Cove. They kind of originate with the Port of San Francisco.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, okay, we'll take a couple more questions. We do have some more of Raylene's works to look at, but Ron wants to know, is it next to a fishing pier? So what's going to happen in this pier out here? Do you know?
I think it is available for fishing and for small crafts to land upon, which will be great. And like I said, I'm on the board of the community boating center and live on the water. So, and you are also aligned with this. I think it's very important to have access to the water and encourage that and that relationship. And it makes us all like better stewards of the environment and get to see, we have this gorgeous bay in our backyard. And I think we kind of, as a culture, turn our back on it, but it's just a tremendous asset that we all have that belongs to all of us.
Yeah,
So,
no,
yeah.
I think you're right about people turning their back on the Bay. I have to say, like, the pandemic is really what got me to engage with the Bay, and many of you out there know that I'm very drawn to it now. Um, and I think I'm hearing there's going to be a San Francisco Bay water trail site at India Basin, so which would enable people to get into the water with kayaks and other boats. So that's really important, having that bay access.
Yeah, and just a shout out to the India Basin Neighborhood Association, which has long advocated for this site in the whole neighborhood. They've been hosting like monthly kayak launch, opportunities, parties, what have you, like, one Saturday a month to get folks out there. And I mean, now they'll have like a really cleaned up site and an ideal launch to have access and get folks on the water.
Yeah, it's just so great to be connected to that place, isn't it, Raylene?
It is. And I'll be honest, I want to arrive to the opening party by ship.
All right, all right. We'll look forward to that. I did want to let's take a look at some more of your works, because this is just one of many things you have done. And so this is another one of your works. It's in a private building in Sunnyvale, so down in the South Bay, and its title is Star Sailor for Ellison Onizuka.
Mhm.
I want to throw that question out to the audience. Like, what are you seeing in this image? How do you react to it? What do you like about it, or what don't you like about it? What are your thoughts just seeing this? We're going to give you the background just like we did with Lady Bayview, but again, like, what's a gut reaction to what we're looking at? And I'll give you guys a second to think about this. Let me show you a couple images. So this is in a conference room. So that gives you an idea of the scale. I know we have, you worked with I think you worked with children to put some of the bird images up. Is that right, Raylene?
Yeah. They wanted to have an element of residents participating, and so it was actually the 3-year-old was the youngest, and we did have, I think, like an 80-something-year-old too. So they really enjoyed that part.
And Paco, you've got your hand raised. Go ahead, Paco.
Most popular person, like in a Kona Airport in Hawaii.
So it reminds you of the Kona Airport in Hawaii?
Reminds me.
Okay.
Yes, it really reminds me.
So you're
In
getting
the
a
big
sense,
island of Hawaii.
it makes you think of Hawaii, which I think that's a great observation. And Peter and Kevin are saying, is that Hakulia?
Absolutely. Good call.
What was the inspiration here?
So yeah.
Go ahead, Raylene.
Should I spill the beans? Yeah, Paco, that's funny you mentioned the Kona Airport, because it is named, I think, after Ellison Onizuka, who was the first Asian American astronaut. And he's Japanese and lived in Hawaii, grew up in Hawaii. His family came to from Japan to Hawaii. And in that image you were on before, you can see off to the right, that's the Challenger. He passed away in the Challenger explosion. I think that was 1984.
86.
86, thank you. And so the entire site is actually, this housing project is named after Ellison Onizuka. Star Sailor is what astronaut means. And so kind of breaking that down into, how do you represent somebody's particular story? The charge to us artists, I was shortlisted for this again with a couple of other artists, And just to be clear, I have many, many more rejections than I have commissions. So I've been on both sides of this. But how do you represent somebody? Is it just with their face? Is it with, for me, I wanted to kind of paint the story of this person's life, also in the context of how I saw it connecting to a bigger picture here. So, yes, it's Hawaii, and we've got a little rainbow on the horizon.
Excuse me. You know what? There are lots of Japanese people in Hawaii.
That's right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in a way, this is also, you're right, Paco, this is also very much an immigrant story, and that kind of dovetails into this idea of, his family's relocation to Hawaii, and the Hokulea speaks to that as well. Really nice identification, Peter and Kevin. That the Hokulea is a recreation of the historic ships that the Polynesians built when they came from, the Polynesia south of the equator and traveled courageously up to the Hawaiian Islands. I can't imagine that navigation, but they did it, and they populated the islands, and they had all the wherewithal. And so Ellison Onizuka also happened to be a deep sea fisherman, and so it's kind of this these large tunas out there, and it really struck me, this relationship between the explorers, the sea explorers, and these people who the immigrants the Polynesians who came from Hawaii, and these people who are out at sea, and these vessels with nothing around, a great vast of nothingness, and to the way the astronauts also have these this explorative spirit and technology, and are just in these, supported by these small vessels with the great nothingness around it. So this is speaking to on those kind of levels, the sea exploration, space exploration.
Yeah, it does sound like it was really fun to involve the children in the creation of this. Was that a first experience? Have you done that before?
I have had, I guess it was, I've volunteered with children and had them do things, not on my, commissioned public art pieces permanently. Prior to this, that was, you got to give them guidelines and little, so I had this flock of birds that they could add to this, like the way that birds follow fishing boats and whatnot. And they really enjoyed it. And a couple of adults also wanted to participate. So it was open to the whole community, and it was a community building project. This is actually their community room. It's an affordable housing center in Sunnyvale, and they have a mission to provide housing to veterans. I think their population is like 25% vets, and they had interesting stories about being at sea and flying, and this relationship with Hawaii. And so it's cool, when you create something that other people can respond to and share their histories and vantage points with. And yeah, the Onizuka Air Station, somebody's Ronan's commenting in Sunnyvale. So that's part of why that history that you're speaking to about that naval or military site in Sunnyvale, this replaced part of that. And there was some behind, the government dealings of like, well, you can have this site, and they traded parts, and then that was part of the public art kind of mandate to honor that story and have it be this beneficial thing for housing and art and the whole package.
So we've seen two of your works, and both of them have ships in them. I think we're going to segue to your next work, and we were talking about the involvement of children in this work, but this next one, we're gonna, and here we are looking at some of the more of the birds that the kids put in place.
Yeah.
So, by the way, all these pictures are taken from Raylene's website. We'll give you the web address. There's some really cool stuff there, but this is again, we're gonna hold back for a second and just tell you guys, this is going to be put on a wall It's a tunnel that goes under Highway 101 between Marin City and Sausalito. So it's located right up here. And I think it's used by, well, we'll hold off on that. I don't want to reveal too much, but you'll see like we've got these images going through there. So it's going to really brighten this space, which is pretty drab right now. And I'll ask you guys, like, what are your thoughts on, what are we looking at? How do you think this is going to change the experience of walking through this tunnel? I see we're finishing up some comments. So does anybody have any thoughts on this? And I have to say I'm excited about it because it's a connector to the Bay Trail. Again, my obsession with the Bay Trail. And, it just seems like a great opportunity to make a public place that people visit look a lot nicer. Sarah's saying it looks like a rainbow of colors, and Catherine sees hands reaching out.
Is it hands or is it birds?
So we're not, well, from this, I think, well, Raylene, are they, oh, and then Marcia's noticing like a kind of a relationship with Escher kind of images. Or Catherine sees flying pigs. That's great. I love that. Now I see them. But yeah, and then Paco, go ahead, Paco.
Actually, I still see like hands, fingers too in this tunnel.
So you're noticing
like in
hands.
a wall cladding too. Really.
And then Gail is saying that space really needs help. Thanks, Raylene. Yeah, and Raylene, why don't you tell us more about this, what this tunnel, like who uses it, some of the history?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is this dark and kind of sad and scary tunnel that it goes under the highway and between the communities of Sausalito on the west side, which is primarily a white community, and Marin City on the, east side, and then Marin City's on the west side, which is predominantly African American. And I think for a long time, folks have wished that something would happen in this tunnel. But I have to say, I cannot take full credit for this because there's a group. This is a community-driven project, and there's a steering committee that has, another artist and group tried to do something here a few years ago, thinking about children's handprints in the tunnel. And this group picked up the baton and asked me to help unify this and make this possible and help usher it into in a visual way. So I'm a part of this group, and we are, it's called All Our Children United, and it specifically will be taking the handprints of all of the children in Marin City and Sausalito who either live or go to school here. It's about 800 to 900 kids. It's hard to exactly get a figure on that, but we're going to do our best to do outreach within the schools and provide homeschool kids opportunities and a couple of other sessions to reach out in parks and whatnot, so all the kids can participate. And this is a healing project, I think, because our Southern Marin School District is actually the first school district to be forced to desegregate by the State Attorney General of California in over 50 years. And it's been a problem, and the schools have been inadequately serviced and funded and whatnot. So there'd been a lot of debate, and they hadn't been able to figure it out. And now this fall, after this State Attorney General stepped in, they decided to make the school in Sausalito the grammar school. And so some kids will be walking through this tunnel from Marin City to Sausalito, and then the middle schoolers will be in Marin City, and they'll be walking through this tunnel in the other direction. So, this is about that unification. It's about bringing, some brightness and that the energy from the kids. And my idea was to also, another thing that unifies us, we're very blessed to have these gorgeous skies and sunsets and sunsets. And so on the east side, where the sun rises in Sausalito, I'm using sunrise colors. And then on the west side where the sun sets in Marin City, I'm using sunset. And they're more or less the same colors, but where they meet in the middle is this bright yellow part, which happens to be the darkest part of the tunnel. So that will create a rhythm as drivers come through and see, that, this story of everybody's left their handprints on this. I think as kids walk through, it's going to be like the little kids' handprints will be lower where they can reach them, and then the bigger kids' handprints will be higher. And so it'll create a new energy and definitely, I hope, brighten up a blighted space and speak to unifying our communities with something positive.
Well, don't you think that like the kids that go through this tunnel, they're going to always, like when they go by their handprint, they're going to see it. They're going to say, I'm part of this.
Yeah.
It's a very inclusive piece.
Yes.
And it does remind me of some of the Ruth Asawa works that we have, particularly the one at Union Square, where she created this clay kind of, it represents all these different places in San Francisco, but she got many people involved in making this. So it was like a community project, and she like brought it all together, but she loved working with lots of other people.
Yeah. It's a very exciting project, and I'm about to get real busy.
Yeah. Does anybody have any, before we move on, any other questions about this? Definitely, I can see you guys have very positive reactions to it. Gail says, wonderful concept, sunrise, sunset, colors, involving kids is a great idea. They become part of history. And then Paul says it would be interesting to add footprints to the sidewalk. Wow, that's a cool idea.
I like that.
Maybe they need to re-pour the concrete, and go. I know more than a few of us have marred concrete in that way. And Sherry says, this is wonderful. Your work is hopeful and makes me smile. Thank you, Raylene.
Thank you.
I had a question. It looks like a very fun project, and I was wondering, is it going to be a little bit more random in terms of the placement of the hands?
That's a great question, because I'm working with finalizing our submission to Caltrans right now, and that was what I was debating. Like, do they come in grids? And like, obviously there's a coordination thing. Like, we're going to have a certain size paper that the kids will then stencil their hands. And I'm hoping that there's like some variation between, where they put their hands. And so that would alone offer some more variation. But then I'm thinking about staggering them more like bricks, so they're not completely vertical. I was just working on that yesterday.
I was imagining all the kids going into the tunnel, and you had pans of paint, and they'd stick their hands in it. And
it would be fun, but it also apparently presents a lot of other, safety and the mess and limiting them to one handprint and whatnot.
One last thing I would like to say is, what will you put over it to be able to remove graffiti? Because I'm sure that will be an issue at some point.
Yeah, that's absolutely an issue in our budget, and we're doing fundraising right now. But in our budget, there's something like 4 or 5 coats of anti-graffiti coating that will have to be applied after it's done. But yeah,
it'd be nice if that wasn't necessary, but probably it is.
Yeah.
Marcia asked a question. I think I know the answer. She says, what we're looking at now, will that be removed? This is not what's there now. This is an artist. This is your rendition. Looks like it is what's there now, which is part of your one of your great talents, I think.
I do have to. Thank you. Yeah, I do have to make. I do my best to portray what will be there, and it's funny. I just completed a signage project for my cousin's opening a roller skate rink in Emeryville. Shout out. And so I've been working on that, but I had to do a rendering of even just the signage for that, and I just completed that like Friday night. I'm like, oh, it looks just like the rendering, So this is a rendering. I do it in Photoshop to give folks an idea. This is what I'm talking about, because you got to be able to convey what it's going to look like, and it usually evolves over time. But yeah, so this right now it's just really dark and dirty and a little bit tagged up, and there's none of this exists yet, but we hope by this summer.
Great. And then you have a 7-minute video on your website, and I just thought, hopefully this isn't too distracting, because you're going to see Raylene talking in this video, and we're just going to be talking on our Zoom. So she's not really talking to us, but this gives you a sense of your studio,
Yeah.
which is in Sausalito.
Yeah.
And some of your other works, some of which, there are pieces that people can buy for their own collections. And that's what I saw when you were showing at the Open Studios. But I want to go back to this, the public works that you do. And I always marvel at how artists, you kind of have to trust the public to look at your works, and kind of like, you have no control over how people are going to react to them and what they're going to learn from, or what their thoughts are going to be. So how do you deal with that, Raylene?
Well, I do my best to, for me, it's important to provide several avenues of entry. Like I call it, for the fast visitor, somebody who's going by something, and maybe just glances over or doesn't, have time to dig into the artwork. I want them to have a feeling, a lot of time that can be conveyed with like color or rhythm, just visually, have a response to it that's hopefully positive. And then for somebody else who's more curious or engaged, like a lot of your audience here, you guys are very engaged. Thank you. They can dig in a little bit or find out or say, oh, what's going on here? And put a little bit more together, or maybe, find out something they didn't know about the site or the history or what have you. Yeah, but there's definitely a lot of, you got to let it go, and people, there's always going to be a mixed reaction, or, it's a wide world.
Yeah, it is funny. It's like I go to something like those open studio events, and I don't even think too much. I just like look at something and say, am I drawn to this? Is this, and there's so many there's so many things that I'm not drawn to. But I have to say, like, as soon as I saw your stuff, I was really like, I really wanted to engage with it, and that's kind of what led to us talking. And
I'm glad you did.
Yeah, me too. And I'm really, I do feel like, since there is a connection between your work and the Bay Trail, that we can do, maybe do another segment about your work on the Bay Trail program.
Thank you. Yeah, that'd be great.
And and then Ron is asking, what's the background behind you in your Zoom?
Oh, this is a piece. So I've been thinking a lot lately about stained glass windows, and I had a piece that was hearkening to stained glass shown at Hunters Point, where we met, and I think maybe have images of that too. But I was a part of an art exhibit, a group art exhibit hosted by somebody who just put together this exhibition at Terra Gallery in SF, off of Harrison Street by the base of the Bay Bridge, and it was for artists who, like large scale artists like myself and other sculptors and stuff, who hadn't had an opportunity to make art during the whole pandemic, since we kind of use buildings or need this space and patronage to apply our craft. And so I got invited to make a piece, and I did it out of pocket, but I wanted to have something that was like, stained glass in a secular setting, so it's not religious, but something that had this like, uplifting spirit as we all kind of came out of the pandemic. It was in April of last year, so it was one of the first events after we got the vaccine and people could kind of gather again a bit, very cautious, COVID limited space, but and re-engage art in our lives. So I made this big piece. It's called the Rainbow Vortex, and it does use like kind of secular geometry, and it's you can see through it. It's actually cut lines, so the city and the light comes through it and changes through the day, and you can see, like, you know, the Bay Bridge exit. The cars are kind of like the city's animated behind it, and it was like a big, I think, 17 by 18 foot piece, and I was just wanted to make it happen in the world.
Is that still up, Raylene?
It's not. It's actually this piece I created in my studio, and I put it on a clear kind of backing, like acetate panels, so I can and have possibly an opportunity to re-show it again in a different setting, maybe in Sausalito soon. So I can. It's in my studio, rolled up basically, and looking for a home.
Oh, and there's a question from Sherry. What is secular geometry?
Whoa, good question. Will I be able to do it justice here? There's this idea of certain. Okay, so even in Islamic art, there's what is considered secular geometry. So there's like repeating patterns, or like if you've heard of the, I think it's the flower of life, the tree of life, where there's concentric circles, where certain repeating geometries then speak to, you know, some of them specifically religious, but sacred geometry. Sorry, that's what, maybe I said secular, but sacred geometry in a secular setting. So there's kind of just these
Like you're getting shapes from religion, but you're using them in a secular way.
yeah, and some of them are not specifically religious, but they're referred to as, like, you know, union or harmony. You know, there's like, for instance, a very simple one is where there's, like, you can think of 3 concentric circles, like a Venn diagram is a very basic kind of sacred geometric shape, and you can fill in, is it Father, Son, Holy Ghost? Is it, you know, we use it to depict a lot of things, and then when you double that, then you almost get the Star of David with like 2 triangles or 6 circles. So then these things build upon each other.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Thank you. Like something spiritual to it. Is that
Something spiritual, yeah.
Thank you. That's really fascinating. Thanks.
So we got one more, we're kind of running low on time, but we've got one more piece that I really wanted you guys to see. This is another public commission work that was done in the concert hall at the University of Nebraska. And I just, without knowing that, I just think it's a really interesting image. It's actually a double image around some doors. So this is what you did for the concert hall. And I don't know if, like, you have to know this place to really understand why you did it this way. So there's a beautiful pipe organ in the back of this concert hall. And so your work is really kind of an advertisement for going inside the hall and experiencing that. So that's, you know, one of these days, if I'm passing through Omaha, I think I am going to want to stop here and check this out.
I recommend it.
Now, Raylene, did you get to hear the organ played?
I have not. I did go to a few concerts here, but I did not get to hear this magnificent piece played. I guess I got to go back too.
That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to plan a cross-country trip and stop in Omaha. And then I think I'll have to hear the pipe organ played. But and this is you, Raylene, outside the concert hall.
Yeah.
So I think we should probably wrap it up. It's at 2 o'clock.
What are the materials?
A few more minutes. The next program's on at 4. So
Yep. So we have a little more time. Well, I do have more images too. So this is stuff, Raylene, that is in that deck that you sent me.
That's my most recent stained glass piece. It takes the the window tracery from Notre Dame Cathedral and speaks to the fire that happened there. And I recently lost a firefighting brother, so it's a personal
Oh,
piece. But yeah, and it's small for me, but it's still like, you know, a 6-foot diameter.
oh, well, I guess I'm sorry about your loss, but it's a wonderful way to kind of, same thing with the Starship. It's a great way to remember somebody with some art.
Yeah.
And then this is when we were actually just looking at in the video, which is pretty cool, very interesting. I mean, to me, this is really interesting way of looking at our planet. A little different from the way we normally see it, right?
It's this is called the Department of Terrestrial Magnetism. So those orange lines are magnetic fields, and so the birds kind of. This is actually the birds are on their flight path. When it's tremendous that these little birds can circumnavigate our globe like that, and they use magnetism to help navigate.
Wow. And one of the things we were thinking of going into, but we didn't so much, is that you work in a lot of different materials. And I know it says on your website that like you like working with tape, and that you almost fainted at a tape store in Paris.
Yeah.
Tell us more about like you just like you look at some new material and you think, oh, this might have a place in my art.
Right. Yeah, I have, people, when I say I'm an artist, like, oh, what do you paint? And I'm like, well, very little paint is used in my artwork, but I do tend to cut things. I started in architecture school, I started using tape to make, my drawings. And it has evolved from there. And like you pointed out, I went to, I stayed at a hotel in Paris, and it was next to a whole tape store with just like piles of gorgeous gold and purples. And so, normally I would find my tape. I loved going to hardware stores when I traveled because they all have different offerings. And, when your palette is limited and you can't mix things like you can in paint, you have to get resourceful. So it's grown over time, and I now use vinyl, like signed vinyl. That's what a lot of these works are. Marcia, to answer your question, that one piece is not vinyl, and I'm looking to going into other durable materials. That was cut woods and acrylics and like mirrored bits to layer that and speak to musical instruments. But the vinyl is kind of like super tape. It's like a big giant roll of tape that I can then lay things out in I start with a hand sketch, and then I pull it into the computer, maybe do a mock-up, then get very technical with how it's pieced together, and it's cut panel by panel, and it can be, my largest piece, well, like, they can cover any amount. I've traveled to New Haven with like a 47-foot piece by 12 feet, and it's just like a big puzzle that I then put together. So my tape has become larger and more technical, but I like, I love it as a material.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing more of your work, Raylene, and it's been great talking to you on this program, and I hope we get a chance to talk more, and maybe even do another program together. I'm going to skip to the end and send people to your website. So just go to RayleneGorum.com, and if you go to the About tab, you'll get the full 7.5-minute video of you in your studio. I have to say, I just love this necklace. That's a very cool necklace, Raylene.
I'm wearing it again.
And then I think we wanted Paco. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you, Raylene. I clearly people in this audience really loved seeing your art and responded to it. And I hope many of you will get in touch with Raylene and get to see more of her works. Do you want to turn it back